Hi folks, Rod from Mill Creek Saw Shop. We decided to bring you another informational video about some popular saws in the Husqvarna and Stihl lines, like we did with the 362 and the 562, kind of a no-nonsense head-to-head comparison so that you understand what you're getting and so forth. The first thing that I think I'll throw out there so that everybody in the audience understands is what happened with Stihl and Husqvarna in the market quite some time ago. When both of these companies came to the United States, they only built saws one way, and that was the best way. Didn't matter where the price came in. The performance and the components were all top-notch. The old saws had split crankcases, a jug that bolted down to the top. They only built them one way, and that was the best way. Now things have changed. It's 30 years later. Both of these guys realized that you don't have to build just one type of saw. You can build saws a little bit differently. And that's what we have up on the counter today. Saws that are more of a modular design as opposed to a strict component-based design. And what it did is it allowed Stihl and Husqvarna to make a couple of different models using the same platform and kind of expand their wings a little bit, get into different markets. Today they're called ranch saws or homeowner saws, maybe weekend warrior saws. And the old saws, or the old design saws that are still made today, are now considered pro saws or commercial saws. Split crankcase versus modular. And when I say modular, what I mean is these saws are basically made of plastic. The housings are plastic, and then the motors are built in a different part of the factory and then screwed into the chainsaws. You can see the plastic designs on the bottom. Is it as strong and robust as a split crankcase design? No, it can't be. Will it work for the weekend warrior, the farmer, the rancher, somebody cutting firewood? Yes, and it works fairly well. Now, there's pros and cons. When you go to this type of design, you're going to gain weight, but you're going to keep down cost. Similar saw in a 311 or 391 displacement is $700–800. Same thing with Husqvarna. You take a 455 versus a 353 or one of the split crankcase designs, and they're going to be a lot more money than these modular design saws. Now, the other thing that we hear a lot is, which is the best? Which one is the best saw? That's what we try to do with the 562, 362 comparison, is talk about the different designs and let the customer make his mind up. Again, both of the saws have a lot of plastic. The loop handles are plastic, the side covers are plastic, the handles, the cases, it's all plastic. That being said, plastic doesn't like cold weather. We had a cold front blowing here last week. Here's a saw over here with a plastic loop handle, and that's what happens when it gets cold outside. They break, they don't give. Again, it keeps the price down. We laid out some saws so that we can talk about platforms and designs. 271, 291, pretty much the same chainsaw, a little bit different displacement. 271, a $379 saw. 291, $449. The 271 is the 3.6 cubic inch saw. The 291 is the 3.39 cubic inch saw. Step up to the next platform within this niche. You've got 311, 391, 311, 479, 391, 569, 3.6 cube, 3.9 cube. Okay, so 4 saws within these 2 units. Husqvarna, you have the 455 and the 460. The 455, 3.4 cubic inches at $449. The 460, 3.7 cubic inches at $499. So very, very comparably priced, very competitively built. These guys are looking at these guys and vice versa on design, price, weight, so on and so forth. These saws replaced 290s, 310s, and 390s. These are much better units than their predecessors. They're lighter, they don't vibrate as much, they run faster, they're just a better put together chainsaw. 455, 460 really didn't replace anything. They're fresh models in the line. The other thing to talk about is model numbers. And the model numbers really don't mean anything. They used to, but they don't anymore. The other big myth that was out there was that Stihl, if it was an even numbered saw, it was a pro saw. If it was an odd numbered saw, it was a homeowner saw. That never was true, doesn't mean anything. Again, model numbers don't mean squat. There's basically any more ways to identify what you have for spare parts. Husqvarna's numbers mean a little something. The second two numbers, 55, is going to represent 55 cc's. Okay? The first number is a generational number, but again, it's really not even applicable anymore. As far as running the saws, all of these saws are going to have the same inherent things as far as electronic ignition, chain brakes, inertia activated chain brakes, easy to get to, oil and fuel, easy to start, so on and so forth. The 311, 391, and the Stihl are going to give you compression release, which is going to make the saw a lot easier to crank. Husqvarna, the 455 and the 460 also both have compression release. It's going to make them easy to start. In addition, the Husqvarna is going to give you a primer bubble on the side, which will allow you to get the fuel from the tank into the carb and then flush the older fuel back down in the tank. Helps a little bit with starting the saw, no question about it. So modular design. Modular design means it's a chunk of plastic, it's a housing, motors are built over here, motor comes down the assembly line and they smack them in. These are all built the same, regardless of how they look, they're built the same. 455, 460, 271, 291, 311, 391. Now the power on these is going to change obviously as you go up. 291 is going to be about a 3.5 horsepower chainsaw. 455, 3.5 horsepower chainsaw. 291, 3.7, 311, 4.2, 391, 4.4. The 460, about 3.7. One of the big differences on these saws is the 271, 291 run a 325 pitch chain. 311s, 391s, 455, 460s all run big 3H chain. And what that means is that that big 3H chain is taking a little bit of that power away. So a 291 with a 16-inch bar and a 311 with a 16-inch bar, even though the 311 has a bigger cubic inch saw, when you put that 3H chain on there, it's going to slow it down. So the saws are going to cut the same. It comes down to preference. What do you have that you're replacing? Is it something that you can utilize out of your old saw on your new saw? That type of thing. Anti-vibration systems for years and years. Stihl was only ever rubber shock vibration. Husqvarna was spring. Now everybody is spring. So the spring mounts are about the same. Husqvarna for years and years was always pulling their air in from the side, blowing it up a little duct into the top housing to keep the air cleaner, let them run longer between air filter services. As you can see now, Stihl has copied that design and does the exact same thing. Big improvement on these saws. The old saws, the filters got dirty fast, and they run a compensating carburetor, so the customer didn't know the filter was dirty, and what he was doing, he was compromising the power of the saw. So now with it being sealed up and sucking air from the side, like the Husqvarnas do, they work fantastic. One of the downsides to this modular design saw is that you're not going to get the same service life out of a split crankcase design. You're certainly also not going to pull the jug off of these things and put a new piston and cylinder on them. Those days are gone. However, the prices reflect that. So the prices on these saws are very reasonable. They last a decent time. They're not going to be as robust and as heavy duty as their comparable commercial models because of the plastic that's utilized. And when I pull the side cover off, you can see that the bar studs are just threaded into plastic. And that's a limiting factor on how long of a bar and chain that you're going to put on these things, because you can't hang a bar and chain off of these plastic saws and expect everything to work and live the way it's supposed to. Again, there's plastic back in behind this plate. So there's only so long of a bar that you can hang on these before it's going to be detrimental to the life of the chainsaw. The engines, all the engines of these saws are completely vertical, meaning the piston and cylinder are traveling straight up and down on both the Husqvarna and the Stihl. Internally, these guys use 2 piston rings. These guys use 1 piston ring. Comes down to a philosophical difference on them. We do see If the customer's a little harder on the saw, the 2-piston ring design will outlast the single piston ring design. Doesn't mean it's a bad design, just means that these will last longer and have a little longer service life if the saw is not properly maintained than the single piston ring setup will. Both saws run on, or brands and models run on 50-to-1 fuel. They're basic non-computerized saws. They do meet the current emission standards, but they don't have any fancy computers in them. Standard electronic ignition, fairly standard carburation, nothing super fancy. The tops are screwed on both lines. These will come with a Torx head wrench to pull the top cover off. No quick clips. Screws. And the top cover pops right off. You can see inside the chainsaw, the decompression valve, the air filter, some of the linkage on the saw, that type of thing. Pretty basic. 311s, 391s, adjustable oiler, 271, 291, non-adjustable oiler, 455, 460, adjustable oiler. Husqvarnas are going to run a metal oil pump. 311s and 391s are going to run a metal oil pump. 291s, 271s are going to run a plastic oil pump. Air filter right here. Design, I'm not going to pull the top cover off on the 291. 291, 271 looks just the same as these inside. Might have a little bit differently designed air filter, but as far as the components go, it's going to look pretty close to the same. Starting procedures on the saws, all 2-cycle saws start the same. You just have a different procedure between this saw, or this brand, and this saw. This is a little dated, but it still works. You just simply pull the choke, it'll turn the switch to the run position, push the decompression valve, pull it till it fires, take it off choke, pull it again till it fires, and then click the throttle to take it off a fast idle. You're doing the same thing over here. Stihl utilizes one master control, which has been redefined on these new models. You just simply take your thumb and rock it all the way to the bottom, pull it till it fires. Once it fires, take it off, pull it again, click it off the fast idle position, and then off is all the way up. Decompression valve is on the top. A lot of guys don't like these, but if you use the decompression valve in the cold weather, you won't end up like that saw that we showed you over there, because the plastic is going to get brittle as that temperature drops. So if you use the decompression valve, the saw is going to be very easy to crank, very easy to start. Another basic fundamental difference between the 455, 460 and the Stihls is where Husqvarna puts their chain brake. Now their chain brake is going to be external, and it's built into this side cover. So when this is down, when your brake lever is down, the chain brake is engaged around the sprocket. When it's back, it's off. So when you take the side cover off, you have to make sure that the brake is released, and then the side cover will pop off. Kind of see inside there what I'm talking about. Now, the Stihls are built differently. The Stihl, the chain brake, is inside of the chainsaw, so you're not going to see it. Brake down or brake off, you can't see anything going on, and it has no relevance on the side cover. The side cover will come off whether your brake is on or brake is off. Kind of a fundamental difference between the two, and really, chain brake and piston ring are about the only difference between these saws, because they both utilize the spring mounts. They both utilize what Husqvarna called air injection. Stihl doesn't call it that, but it's the same principle. And the displacement and power and run characteristics are pretty much the same. Modular saws, you know, pick it up, feel it, put it in your hands, because that's going to make the difference. Don't compare this to Grandpa's saw. Don't compare this to Grandpa's saw, because Grandpa didn't have that saw. Most likely he had one of the earlier generation split crankcase units, which has different power characteristics and lifetime characteristics. Doesn't make these bad saws, but it doesn't make them the same as the predecessors. Different ball game. Price reflects that. Warranties are comparable. Husqvarna does have a lifetime warranty on their coil. Stihl does not anymore, but we don't have any failures, so don't let that freak you out. That's really not a big decision or buying difference for us. Really, what I think makes most people's mind up when they're buying these is, what are they replacing? Are they replacing a comparable product where they can utilize the bars and chains? If you're cutting firewood, weekend warrior, farmer, rancher, these saws work great. If you're a professional, you're not even looking at these. So don't go back and look at what the logger's doing and using at your place, because it's going to be different than what you're going to be picking up and buying. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave it below, and thanks for watching our video.